Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to talking to James Trezona with Rooster Punk. James, I've been looking forward to this talk because your company is a creative storytelling agency putting the humanity and soul back into B2B marketing. We got lots to dive into. I want to talk about, to kick things off, the power of storytelling. It is so important. It's one of the most important things. And I think it's more important now than ever before as we sit here live on September 2nd, kind of just the distractions with COVID and Delta, and just, I could name so many other things. People need to get lost in a story. And so let's start there. Talk about the fundamental power and how to build a story.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting because we set up as a storytelling agency back in 2012. And I'd run other agencies. I'd done a lot of marketing automation, lots of tech. And I kind of felt that the center of the universe in marketing was moving towards tech. And I'm a tech guy. I love tech. I built a 200-person agency around MarTech. But it's no good without story. And so I went from one extreme, as you often do in your life, right? You go from one extreme to the other, where I sat down with Paul, my co-founder, and said, look, what do we think is interesting? What do we think needs our passion? What's going to excite us in this world? And storytelling was kind of in the consumer world. People started to talk about storytelling, but not in the business to business, which is my world. But actually, when we launched, most people still didn't really know what it was. They were going, okay, what are you as an agency? And so we had to do a lot of educating. And storytelling is powerful because we are hardwired for story. Our brains light up, dopamine gets ready to release,
Absolutely.
Oxytocin if it's a positive resolution. And we are because that's how we make sense of the world.
Right.
That's how we made sense of the world for millennia. And it still is. And what people are starting to appreciate now is that we build our reality through narrative. And that's the interesting bit. And there's been some really interesting, very recent research which has shown that actually when you have a strongly held narrative, even it's not only that that's a kind of an emotional thing, even when you encounter facts which are completely in opposition to that narrative, not only do you reject those facts, but amazingly it actually reinforces the power of that narrative, because you have to kind of work out why you're rejecting those facts. And that is kind of something which actually in society at large, politics, geopolitics, is so important to start to understand, but also on a human level, as you're dealing even with your own inner narrative, it's so important.
So important. I want to rewind a little bit, because it's so interesting that and I agree with you. People are like, wait, what do you do? You're storytellers. I mean, we live in story. We communicate in story. We watch TVs and movies where we get, stuck in the story. Yet when you say storytelling, a lot of times people say, well, what do you mean? Right? Like, what exactly does that mean? And so I'm curious from your perspective as somebody who builds reality through narrative, hence storytelling. When we're kids, our parents tell us stories, right? I mean, my kids are now a freshman in college, a sophomore in high school, but every night for many, many, many years, we sang them songs and told them stories before bed. Storytelling time. When do we lose? And then I guess as I'm sitting here thinking, there's this like time where we like lose that innocence, right? Where we don't need that story. And then when we become it, like this whole thing is reminding me of like Peter Pan, like when he forgets, who he was, because when do we forget that storytelling was a thing?
It's fascinating. Yeah. It's not so much that story becoming less important to us. It's that we kind of lose the ability to see it as a story. We kind of become blinded by reality in a way. We think it's all serious and grown up, but actually we are still making sense of the world through the view of narrative and personas. And so, for instance, I mean, there's lots of books written about the fundamental. There's 3 stories, there's 7 stories, which all narratives are based on. But regardless of which you subscribe to, the fact is there's not that many. And actually, fundamentally, that's how we make sense of the world. We think, is this a kind of revenge story, or is this a coming of age story, which I'm
Right.
part of? And that, we're not talking just about watching films. We're talking about the stories we are in when you're in business. Is okay, is this a maturity story, or suddenly it's all
Right.
about us growing up? We make sense of the world through that. And we just fail to see that this is actually almost as creative as those
Right.
stories we were told when we were 8, 9, etc. as a kid. We fail to see that because we get blinded by the seriousness which we're told.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. Right.
Right.
Right. It's like the seriousness. As a business coach, I'm working with, I'm not saying this to impress, just to impress upon, solopreneurs to Fortune 100 companies and everything in between. And a lot of times, they don't think of talking to their, a leader talking to their people, a manager talking to their people, a salesperson doing a presentation. They don't think of it as storytelling. They get so in their head as far as the serious element of it, they become like nuts and bolts, right? Versus rewinding and tapping into the rhythm, the formula, the beauty of a story and how it resonates on a soul level. And so I kind of want to go there, right? So your business is about putting humanity and soul back into B2B marketing. And so when I think of it as we are discussing, it's getting back to the soul of being a kid, right? Yeah. And remembering why storytelling is so important. And so how do you infuse, as you're working with companies to build reality through narrative and teach them how to storytell, how do you get the soul back in? How do you get them first to get back into their soul so they can get into the soul of their buyer and their clients? And so then everything begins to really resonate and be in alignment.
Yeah, lovely. Great question. Because you can say, hey, it's all about empathy. It's about storytelling. What does that mean? Well,
correct.
I'll give you an example. So Crowdcube, they're a wonderful company. It is equity crowdfunding. So people get the concept. Now, we started working with those guys a few years ago. And amazing company, but they'd start to focus on the platform and the technology. They're going, look, what we need to be is the best platform out there, and we've got to have the slickest onboarding process. And it started to become all about how quickly and how easy you could make this process and how much you could promise in terms of time to market with your launch and your crowd raise and success, and start to be about numbers, right? And we got engaged with them when they're looking to come to the US and looking at brand, and we said, look, actually, guys, why did you do this? What actually is the underlying purpose of you trying to do this? And actually started to talk to them about some more fundamental stuff that they wanted to make investment more democratic and become open to more people. But then but why? So what? Well, what does that do? It changes the economy. It changes how people are engaged. It creates opportunity for innovation, which might not be there, especially in communities or kind of underserved areas, niche markets or environmental, social kind of areas. And that's changing the world. So we start talking about that. And we took them from where they were talking about, hey, this is about invest in easily anywhere, to focusing actually what people found interesting, which was the entrepreneurs and the ideas that he or she was really challenging the world with and making the mark with, and actually took the focus from the platform, the technology, which they were kind of selling, to say, no, it's about what this belief economy, we started to call it, is creating. It's about changing the world towards being more belief driven. And actually, there's a kind of misconception that people wanted to make lots of money out of the investment. Not true. Most of the people investing were investing, a few $100s, a few £100 to actually be part of something. And so we created a narrative called Funding the Wonderful. And you know what? They were like, whoa, that's a bit soft. That's a bit... it's not as hard. We're talking to entrepreneurs, and we took some persuasion, and we went out and we spoke to these entrepreneurs, and we did spoke to the audiences, and they're like, that really works, because it is about shining a light on the stories that these companies, whether they are creating an amazing peanut butter sauce, it's one of them, to people who are funding new plastic-free ways of packaging water, so large and small, they're doing wonderful things. And so Funding the Wonderful became an umbrella narrative just about shine the wonderful thing people are doing. Interestingly, their major competitor in the UK was going the other way towards robo investments and how the returns and reducing their pricing models for the entrepreneurs. And out of the two, guess who did better?
Yeah.
Funding the Wonderful.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about. I know a lot of the things that you guys do, just to layer in some of, what you're talking about even more. You help companies reimagine their brand position, their story, their identity, through thought leadership and creating, marketing campaigns and things of that nature, that piggyback off of, the story that you're building for them. But to me, and I see this as a coach myself, sometimes to get to simple is not an easy or quick path, right? And so I think a lot of times companies will say, oh, well, we'll do it internally. But to me, the same level of consciousness that got you to where you are, or the same level of, is not going to get you to where you need to be. And sometimes if you're off just a smidge, it makes a big difference. I see it in my coaching when I'm coaching clients. It's like they're doing it this way. So, well, why don't you do it this way? It's like and that little piece, right, makes a big difference. So, can you talk a little bit about the journey of when somebody is ready and how to surrender so you can do your work, right? Because I would imagine we're kind of the same. Like I can, as a business coach, I do my best work when my clients come and they're ready to do the work and surrender to the process.
Yeah, really good question.
Yeah.
I think it does vary. It's not so. I mean, I'm fascinated in looking at business growth and those kind of tipping points and different maturity, but it's not always a function of size. It is a function of attitude. And that attitude needs to be informed by, yes, the willingness to be challenged and the willingness to get a second or third pair of eyes onto something. But you kind of do need to start to understand, and I think the world is changing. The pandemic accelerated this. But you need to understand the power of empathy and emotion in business and how actually that people are motivated not by money, they're motivated by status and sense of satisfaction and purpose, and that they're doing something that's worthwhile. It's not just millennials and Gen Zs, that's everyone actually. And as increasingly we are, in a world where people have opportunities for jobs, suddenly the job markets are exploded, right? And fundamentally, you need to believe this stuff. And we say that as part of our, when a client comes to us or a prospect comes to us and says, we want to work with you, one of the things we say is, look, we'll only work with you if you really are willing to drive this through your business, because this is not about marketing. This is not about creating a brand veneer and then nothing else changes. You've got to believe it from start to finish. Everyone in your organization has to buy into this. Their behaviors have to align with the values or the brand narrative. Otherwise, what are you going to believe? If the brand narrative is here, and actually when you encounter somebody or you see their behavior or you read up about them, if it's in conflict, you're not going to believe the brand narrative. It's all got to align, and that's the bit that's the indication. If there is, and it's not just the CEO, her saying, right, I'm behind this. She has to commit to making sure the culture is in alignment with the stories you're telling, because otherwise you create disharmony, which destroys authenticity.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think alignment is so important. All right, now let's rewind your story, James, right? So, I believe that success is not a straight line. And so give us, I want two things. I want the 90-second Reader's Digest version of how you got to today, right? And the mentor that planted a seed as early as you can think back that influenced your decisions to be where you are today.
Lovely. Okay, so real quick, life story though, because the life bit is interesting. So South African born. Politics out there meant my family had to leave the country because they were politically active. We lost everything because you couldn't go out of the country. So we went from living big house, staff, pool, cars, to living on a floor of friends. Parents rebuilt their careers. Got into pharmaceuticals. My father, my mother's a teacher. He did very well, went over to the US, working for one of the big globals, global head of marketing for those guys. Realized he didn't love it, hated it, quit. Went again. So second time, big house, big pool, left it all behind, and he got into ethical work. And that's kind of, again, big stuff to little stuff. And for me, personally, I started in tech, did really well in tech, made lots of money, Y2K, real thing, Wasn't a fake.
I was in
certainly,
the internet. I was in the internet business too. I started a business in. I graduated college in '95. Started an internet company. Sold it in '97, and worked with them for a couple of years. But I remember Y2K like it was yesterday. Just sitting there thinking, is the world going to go right? I know. So we must be the same. How old are you, James?
I am 45.
Oh, so I'm 49. So the year I graduated college was 1990, was May of 95. And I started my business in June of 95 with my brother and a buddy of ours. Yeah.
Exciting times.
Exciting times. Yeah.
It was.
All right, so keep on going. So Y2K.
So Y2K, made a ton of money. I was working for CSC. I was making sure the banks didn't fall over. That was great. But then realized, IT wasn't where my heart was. So I came back again, kind of left that career behind, said, okay, let's go into marketing. Went to advertising agency Saatchi & Saatchi, famous, but amazing. Within a couple of months, realized they had no idea what technology meant. The MD said, what are you going to do when the internet fad's going to go away? It's like, wow. Yeah. So left that, went to a startup. We grew to like 120 people. Then built and sold a couple of agencies. So, it's been all around making decisions. And your mentor point, it's really my father, who's always said, look, no matter how hard that decision is, no matter what you leave behind, do the thing that's right for you. And I've seen that. And money's great, but to be able to walk away from that and follow your heart has been something which I've grown up with from a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I've always followed my heart too. I had an internet company, sold that, then got into commercial real estate, was a broker, was tired of being a broker, wanted to start my own business. Ended up being a manager, took over my office in August 4th of 08. The market crashed right after. Did that for 6 years successfully, all of them successfully, and then left that because I was just done and wanted to start my coaching business. And so it was, I get it, because it's moving through fulfillment versus moving, through just your paycheck. And so in a time where we are right now, James, what they're calling the Great Resignation, 4 million people, quit their jobs in April of 2021. The studies are showing that millennials are just on the verge of, exploding new ideas and concepts in businesses. Pre-COVID studies we're showing and pointing to that by the year 2030, 85% of the jobs that exist don't exist. This was pre-COVID 2020. And so as all of this is happening, and we have kind of these not just the millennials, but multiple generations and multiple people, I think all looking for more fulfillment. More, I don't know if balance is a real thing, but more balance and being in alignment with their values and being fulfilled. What advice would you give those people today?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, all that disruption, what it's doing is historically people define themselves through their job. Hey, what do you do? I'm an advertiser.
Right.
I'm a lawyer. Yeah. You've got to start changing that narrative. So fulfillment comes when your definition of who you are starts with you. It's self-defined. It's not defined by the paycheck or your job title or your track success. Actually, you've got to control the narrative. And so it's intrinsic satisfaction, because what we're seeing is and again, social media, you can talk about that sort of stuff, but when people's conception of what success looks like and comparison is the death of joy. That's a great Oscar Wilde quote. When you're comparing yourself against the wrong things, we are trained, we are designed to always look to the aspirational. When you think, I'm less fun than my friends, you always think about your most fun friend, your most successful friend. You've got to stop that. You've got to look inside to define your own narrative. And that's why storytelling actually isn't just about marketing, isn't just about geopolitics. It's all about yourself.
It's all about yourself.
What you want to be. And that's where fulfillment lies, and you go way back to Socrates and, Zen Buddhism. This is all around, not sitting there meditating. It's actually just about understanding where lies confidence and where lies your sense of satisfaction. That's what you got to do.
Yeah. The work starts within, right? And you're really, I agree with you. You run your own race. I love it. All right, quick speed round, James. Favorite book? I see you have a lot of books behind you. Favorite book and why?
It's a series. It's the Thomas Covenant's Chronicles by Stephen Donaldson. I don't know if you know it, but it's just mind blowing. Always love sci-fi and fantasy. It's one of the most mind blowing series of books you ever read because it talks about the paradox that is humankind. You have an anti-hero who ends up in an alternative world where he's hugely powerful, but he's massively contradicted. And I think that is it's really dark at times, but it's ultimately incredibly uplifting. And it's a truth about humanity that we're the mix.
I love it. I love it. All right. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
Yeah, probably the realization that money wasn't at all even aligned with happiness. We were most happy when we were living on a friend's floor and had no swimming pool, no car. And it's simple, but it's true. Do not peg your happiness onto money. Yeah,
I love it. I love it. Fast forward 100 years. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want your story to be?
So Rooster Punk, it's called Rooster Punk because roosters are a symbol for good. We want to be part of, hopefully, even if it's just a footnote in the movement for business, focus on B2B, but they're big brands, towards being more ethical, purpose-driven, human. And when we say human, it's not just talking human, it's about doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's business, part of that journey. And I talk to huge companies like, your Expedias and your Capgeminis, and they are starting to recognize the importance of being human, being responsible.
Yeah, I love it. Tell everybody who your ideal clients are and how they can connect with you.
Ideal clients, again, not size. We work with startups, scale-ups, and footsies, but it's absolutely anyone who has a realization and the drive and the commitment to not just create a marketing campaign or a new brand, but take a story, create a narrative, which is going to help transform the company. And business as a force for good is what we're all about. So if you believe that you're positively creating change in your category, innovating, whether that's large or small, that's what gets us excited.
I love it. And we didn't even get to the book, but tell everybody about Humanizing B2B, your book, where they can buy it and what they can expect from reading it.
Yeah, Humanizing with a Z, B2B. So you can search on your Google, but it's on Amazon, but also on independent bookstores too. Quick about it. I mean, we try to make it really practical. There's lots of really highbrow stuff being written about storytelling, the neuroscience, all that good stuff. We quote quite a lot of that, but we try to take, Paul and I are prolific readers and podcast listeners, and there's so much wisdom out there. What we were trying to do with it was just condense a load of that thinking, a load of that really great insight into really practical advice, some of the key principles, and make it useful and kind of fun to read as well. They should be. It was number one when we launched in for marketing and advertising. It's not a hard read. It's supposed to be uplifting. It's supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to help change the way you think about business.
I love it. James, this was a pleasure. I loved our talk. I love talking about the power of storytelling, the power of connecting and getting into alignment, fulfillment, getting in touch with your soul. That's what it's all about. And I appreciate companies like you who are doing great work with great energy behind it. So appreciate you being on the show today. If anybody, Think Community, if James can help you, reach out. James, give me your website one more time.
So roosterpunk.com. Very simple.
All right. I love it. All right, James, this was great. Think Community. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. Great chat.
Thanks, James.